I'm now going to introduce our special guests. We're doing something different this year as we try to make this a really engaging experience. Kudos to the team for proposing this fireside chat. So this is where we get back to our program. This is the feature event of the evening, so I ask for your attention. We have joining us Senator Ed Markey, Massachusetts Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer, both sitting down with our special guest, Boston media legend, he'll say Cambridge, we'll just say Boston, Jim Braude, to a fireside chat. First, let me say a few words about each of these participants. They're all legends. Senator Ed Markey's leadership on energy and climate change and the environment is unparalleled. Throughout his time in office, he has worked relentlessly and successfully to protect the environment and grow the clean energy sector. He is the co-author of the Green New Deal. The first comprehensive climate bill to pass a chamber of Congress, the Waxman-Markey bill, and author of several billion-dollar provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. Senator Markey has been a long-time champion for investing in developing clean energy infrastructure. He most recently introduced the Green New Deal for Public Schools Act. That's a legislation that would invest $1.6 trillion over the next decade in public schools to revitalize the K-12 education system and upgrade every public school building in the country. His connecting hard-to-reach areas with renewably generated energy, or CHARGE, would lay the groundwork for America's clean energy revolution by advancing critical electric infrastructure to strengthen reliability and lower costs for consumers. We are so glad to have his national leadership for clean energy and to have him here with us tonight. So thank you for joining us, Senator Markey.
Thank you, for sure. Thank you.
Melissa Hoffer is Massachusetts' first ever climate chief. She has dedicated her career to protecting the environment and climate. Prior to her role as climate chief, she served as the acting general counsel and principal deputy general counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency. She also worked in the Massachusetts Attorney General's office as chief of the Environmental Protection Division beginning in 2012 and was named chief of A.G. Healy's newly formed Energy and Environmental Bureau in 2015. I'm also told that in her spare time, she raises a small herd of Nigerian dwarf dairy goats. Is that true? At her farm in Barre, Massachusetts. Yes, that is impressive. And Jim Braude is the co-host of Boston Public Radio on WGBH, the top-rated midday show in the region. He was also the Emmy Award-winning anchor of TV's Greater Boston. I can speak from experience that there's no one better to spend 30 minutes speaking with than Jim, and we are honored to have him here tonight. So please, a warm round of applause for the Senator, Ed Markey, Massachusetts Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer, and Jim Braude. Take it away, folks.
Thank you.
You know, media legend? Are you kidding, by the way? By the way, let me tell you, this media legend is going to quote my favorite thinker, Marx, not that one, Groucho, who once said, "There is nothing like good planning, and this is nothing like good planning." My notes for these two fine souls are locked in my studio. What I have here is the list for Market Basket for after tonight's honest to God true, but I scribbled some notes, so I'm going to do my best. Chief Hoffer, it's a pleasure. Senator Markey, it's a pleasure. I just want to say I have great respect for Joe Curtatone, the former mayor of the second greatest city in Massachusetts, as he knows. By the way, how great did he look in that video with the slow motion walking thing? How fabulous was that? However, and I don't want to criticize you, Mayor Curtatone, He left out what I think I feel is your single greatest campaign, Senator, which you've been waging for years with a profound impact on the environment. What might that be, please?
I think it should be the constitutional right to have year-round daylight savings time.
Let's hear it.
We should not be turning our clocks back this weekend.
Okay, by the way, it's daylight saving time,
Daylight
but whatever. He's a senator. So here's the deal, you two. I don't mean to correct the senator, but it's daylight saving time. This is like speed dating. We have 28 minutes left. We're going to try to move through things. Brevity is appreciated. And since I am a hope-deprived person when it comes to the climate, I thought we're going to spend most of our time talking about challenges and solutions, but I thought we'd start for a minute or two, talk about the things that the hope-deprived should feel best about, if we can. Starting with you, Senator Markey, if you would.
Very quickly, in 2015, the International Energy Agency said the planet was going to warm 4 degrees centigrade. It now believes the planet's going to warm 2.7 degrees centigrade. So it's making progress. Last year, there was more money invested globally in solar than in oil for the first time in history. More good news is that in the United States in 2009, after all of our history, we had 2,000 megawatts of solar cumulatively. This year, we're going to deploy 42,000 megawatts of wind and solar in the United States of America in 1 year. Okay, exponential. We had 2,000 total all-electric vehicles in 2009. This year, we're going to be knocking on 750,000 or 1 million new all-electric vehicles that are sold. And in 2009, we could have had this event at 2 tables, and now because Joe Curtatone is now doing for clean energy what he did for Somerville. He's just blowing it up. It's just an incredible transformation which has taken place, and we're only just beginning because, and I'll just give you this one final number for the good news. Negotiating with Joe Manchin, we were able to get $369 billion worth of investment, but the tax breaks are uncapped. Yep. So Credit Suisse went out last October and they said, oh my goodness, our 50 analysts have determined that it's actually $800 billion of tax breaks. And Goldman went out in March of this year and said it's $1.2 trillion worth of tax breaks, meaning that it's ultimately going to unleash that one bill, $10 trillion worth of investment, public and private, in our country. That was not on the scoreboard 2 years ago, and now it's a revolution that is going to transform our country and potentially save the world with the new technologies that are going to be invented.
So, Chief Hoffer, I am guessing, but feel free to do whatever you want. Yesterday you released an all-of-government report, several dozen recommendations, 87 pages. If I give you 87 seconds, can you do 87 pages?
No, I can't do that, and I was never good at speed dating. So what I will try to do is kind of compress some of it. But I just want to pick on this point. It is a very hopeful moment, because if you think back to the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, that was at that time $90 billion worth of investment, the largest one at a time in clean energy. And as a result of that, we have seen the price of solar in the past 15 years drop by 89%. So that's huge, and that's what's going to happen here on steroids. That's a very hopeful moment. And to bring it back to our state, we have a governor in place who's really hugely prioritized climate change in a way that has created my position and the Office of Climate Innovation and Resilience. So we are injecting climate change into the DNA of every single one of our secretariats. That's really innovative. And that means that we are coming up with cross-cutting solutions that we haven't seen before. So that's something to be positive about. We've had this report come out, and during the time that we were working on the report, and I'll come back to its chief recommendation, remember, we have rolled out the Massachusetts Community Climate Bank. It's the only green bank of its kind in the country that is focused specifically on affordable housing, equity at the center, along with making this housing high quality for people to live in. We also have Secretary Tepper, I don't know if she's in the room tonight, but has begun this very important infrastructure and siting permitting process so that we can begin to move these projects more quickly. We have Secretary Tutwiler, who is our education secretary, who has put in place an innovation pathway for clean energy, which is going to help build the workforce that we need to do everything that you all are doing. And looking at this room is so incredibly energizing for me. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing. And to come back to the report, you know, one of the things in the conversations that I've had with folks over the past many, many months, when you think about the great policies, there are many members of the legislature in the room this evening who have put in place for us incredible statutory framework to get to the emissions reductions that we need to hit by 2050. We need to figure out a way to have strategic funding and financing in place so that we can accomplish those goals, and we're going to do that.
Thank you. So, Senator, if we can start on some of the challenges. Obviously, people say, what's the greatest threat? It's fossil fuel. I would say coming in a close second in terms of greatest threats is the Supreme Court of the United States. Last year, obviously, we know what they did to the EPA vis-a-vis clean air. They followed this year with clean water. I'm assuming you agree, and if you do, what's the game plan to ensure that they don't do even more damage to the efforts of you and people like this in the room?
Well, long-term, because it could take 30 years to reclaim the 2 stolen Supreme Court seats, ultimately. So ultimately, we're going to have to expand the court in order to make up for that. That's a whole other debate, but we're going to have to get it done because they swiped those 2 seats, and there is an anti-environmental Supreme Court now sitting. The biggest answer to them will be, because it turns out they're just political right down to their bones, it's that we're going to create millions of new jobs in our country, and millions of them are going to be in red states. And so what we're going to build is a political army of workers who are going to be saying to the Supreme Court of the United States, if you want to have on your shoulders the ire of blue-collar workers, union workers, all across this country, by the millions who now work in all of these clean energy industries, you try it. But you're going to be causing, like the Dobbs decision on abortion, you're going to cause a political revolution at the grassroots of this country. And just understand that when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced the Green New Deal just 4.5 years ago, it was to ignite 18 to 34-year-old voters in this country. And it was a resolution that created a revolution that created a bill, a moment where Joe Biden signed that bill. And these 18 to 34-year-olds aren't going away. They're going to be there politically, and there would be a huge political price to pay if the Supreme Court sought to take a case from Texas, let's say, and to use it as a way of overturning the IRA.
So, Chief Hoffer, the senator just mentioned jobs, and I think it was Jennifer in the video there said we have 104,000 clean energy jobs in the Commonwealth need. I think she said another 40 by the end of the year. I know that's addressed in your report, but you also mentioned in your report the importance of diversity. You embrace the Biden initiative, Justice 40, the notion that at least 40% of new investments, including clean energy, go to directly to disadvantaged communities. The rhetoric is always there, I think, but the issue is, can the rubber meet the road? So what's the plan to get from here to there, not just for 40,000 jobs, but 40,000 jobs where diversity, equity, and inclusion is really embraced?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim, and I want to briefly just address your prior question because it really lifts up for everybody in this room. The Supreme Court is going to be deciding a case, Loper Bright, soon, that will probably overturn Chevron, which will be a further chip at the administrative state, which will diminish potentially powers of administrative agencies like EPA. So what does that mean for us? It really means that the leadership falls to the states. So everybody in this room who's building this clean energy economy, the horse is definitely out of the barn in it, but it falls to the states and to local governments at this time to really lead on clean energy. So that's crucially important. And to come back to this question, it's really all about stakeholder outreach. So EPA has given formula grants to the states to conduct a lot of outreach about how we're going to be meeting our emission reduction goals. So we actually have resources, and we have been working a lot with labor, our EJ communities, and with others to understand, municipalities in particular, to understand how best can we ensure that the benefits of this clean energy transition are distributed equitably. That's crucial. That's job opportunities, and that also relates to ensuring that we've got housing for these workers as well. That's a really important thing too. You got to have affordable housing for the folks who are going to be doing this work into the future.
Yep.
So you'll see in my report our recommendations, because workforce is of necessity a initiative of the state government that touches on many different secretariats. We expect to see leadership coming out of Mass CEC on that, and we need really tight management of that process with clear goals and clear metrics. We're going to have X many electricians by Y year, and we're going to be testing to make sure that we know that the pathways that we're taking to achieve that are actually working.
Senator, you want to say something
Yes,
about that?
if I could, yeah. We have a dream team. We have Governor Healy, who is going to make us the greenest state in the world, and we have Mayor Wu, who ran as the Green New Deal mayor. So she's going to create a second green monster here, the city of Boston, okay, in terms of all the clean energy that gets deployed. But the reason it's going to happen is that the law requires it to happen. So this bill that we passed that ultimately is going to be $1.2 trillion, it says that 40% of the benefits has to go to communities of color, has to go to disadvantaged communities. It says it in the law. I created in the IRA, I created a $20 billion green bank that McKinsey says will leverage $200 billion worth of private sector investment for upwards of 10,000 projects that will get funded through that bank. And the way I drafted it, 60% of the money has to go to disadvantaged communities, has to go to communities of color. It's the law. And so you have to be intentional, you have to make it very specific, so that's what I did in drafting those provisions to make sure the money went there. And then the Green Bank, now created here in Massachusetts, is going to be the beneficiary of that funding,
right.
But in turn have the responsibility to say to developers, look, our hands are tied.
That's right.
You have to ensure that communities of color, disadvantaged communities, get the disproportionate benefit.
Far too much positivity from me, Senator. So let's return to the challenges for a second. Let's talk about deniers. Yesterday, there was a guy elected Speaker of the House who is anti-LGBTQ. He is anti-aid to Ukraine. He's a pro-insurrectionist. And today's New York Times headline, which I'm sure you saw, reads, "New House Speaker champions fossil fuels and dismisses climate concerns." And of course, there is Donald, call me Nelson Mandela Trump. You can Google that if you don't understand it, where sea level is going to rise, what did he say, 1/100th of an inch in 350 years. The reason I pose this is if the deniers were to retake Congress and the presidency in 2024, is all that you and Elizabeth Warren talk about in the IRA undoable, or is it so baked in that it will continue, the revenues will continue to flow?
The election of 2024 is the most important election in the history of the planet for its safety. We're the first generation to suffer from climate change, and we're the last generation that can do anything about it. So we have to ensure that we win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, or one of them, in order to block the repeal. Because this new speaker, I don't know him, but he knows me. And how do I know that? Because on February 7, 2019, after I introduced the Green New Deal with Joe Curtatone over at Greentown, and Lou Antonellis, the head of 103 electricians, this new speaker designated himself as the deputy policy chief for the Republican Party and did a 13-page report on the Green New Deal, showing how it would ruin America, ruin our country, and by the way, climate change isn't real and it's not caused by human beings. Okay, so that's our new speaker. So as you say, there's a threat. There is a threat at the Supreme Court. There's going to be a threat coming out of the House of Representatives. In fact, the first bill that Kevin McCarthy brought up this year was to repeal the entirety of the IRA and made every Republican vote for it. So yes, this is going to be a battle, but if we can just make it like the Affordable Care Act through the next 4 years to January of 2029, It will be baked into our society the same way the Affordable Care Act is, and it will be unrepealable. But we have to win at least one of the branches in 2024.
You know, Chief Hoffer, speaking of money, I think you said in your report, I did not read all 87 pages, but I did skim 87 pages. I think you say that the maximum amount of revenue that you can rely on from the feds is 30%. Is that not what you say?
It's a big spread. It's somewhere between 8 and 30%.
So
and it really depends on how much private sector money is leveraged by the incentives that Senator Markey referenced.
So where does the 70 to 92% come that's not in the federal money to allow you to accomplish what you lay out in the report?
So this is what we're proposing to look at, because we have to figure out a way that we're going to be, first of all, we need to quantify what we think those costs are going to be. So those are the total costs of reaching net zero by 2050 for transportation, building, power sector. Some of that falls to the state, but some of it will fall to local governments, some of it will fall on other actors, taxpayers, ratepayers, private sector. So we need to figure that out and then come up with a funding strategy. But I suspect that there will be many different ways to fund it. There could be policy mechanisms that both reduce greenhouse gases and generate revenue streams. We've seen that with the model of RGGI, for example. We have a clean heat standard that's under development now, which you could think of as a low carbon fuel standard for the heating fuel sector. So there could be options like that. There could be also other options like the increased use of financing mechanisms like green banks. Right now, the green bank that we have in place is limited to decarbonization, which means getting the fossil fuels out of affordable housing, but its jurisdiction could be expanded to leverage additional private co-investment.
Are you leaning forward like you want to say something about that, Senator?
Well, we're going to have to make changes in the transmission of electricity in our country just to accommodate what the IRA will be unleashing. Will require a doubling of our electrical transmission capacity. And if we want to fully decarbonize our entire economy, will have to be a tripling of that capacity. So we need transmission reform. We're going to have to get that done so that inventors and investors can be producing their projects and moving it into the cities where the population areas are in our country. But we can get this done. That's why I introduced my CHARGE Act 2 years ago in order to make sure that there was a blueprint for how we can overhaul the transmission system in order to get this done. And then these numbers, which Melissa was talking about, become much more achievable because it unleashes much more entrepreneurial activity because those wires are accessible to bring it in off of the ocean. Vineyard Wind is here to bring it off the deserts, to bring it off of rooftops, to bring it off the prairies, and to bring it into the population areas, and we have to get it done.
Can we mention one more set of challenges, if I may, for both of you? I admire the fact, if I may, Senator, it's hard for a Democrat to criticize a Democratic president, but when the president approved the Willow Project on the North Slope of Alaska, I believe your word was, this is disastrous. In the September issue of The New Yorker, Bill McKibben, who, by the way, is on our show once a month, 11 to 2 every day, 89.7 FM, thank you. Thank you. I think that's probably for Bill McKibben. I spoke to him a couple days ago about that, and he said there is a project where the potential emissions are 20 times what Willow is, and those are these LNG export terminals off the coast of Louisiana that are proposed. He has great concerns about what the Biden administration will do. I assume you do too. Could you speak about that project for a second, if you would?
Yeah, so that project is a carbon bomb waiting to go off. So to the extent to which fracking has made it possible to do a lot of historically unimaginable natural gas drilling. Right now, there are a series of LNG export terminals to take that natural gas out of our country. But the amount of fracking and ultimately the amount of methane that would be released, the amount of natural gas that would be burnt around the world would, in that one plant, might be enough to offset all of the gains from the IRA combined. That's how big a decision this is going to be, which is why I'm working so hard to stop it. We just can't allow for the big oil and gas companies to get more and more consolidated in their capacity to produce and their political power. In fact, we're going to have a new climate summit in December in Dubai, and the host country has announced they're increasing from 4 million to 5 million barrels of oil a day, and they're investing $150 billion, and they're hosting the COP, the Conference of Parties, this year. So there are still big challenges here, but Bill McKibben is exactly correct. It's a huge threat, and it only further reemphasizes why we have to protect the clean energy revolution, but also to block the oil and gas companies.
Have you spoken to the president about this yet?
I spoke to.
I've never seen you like this.
Well, I don't want to. You all know you all know the name very well, and many of you know the person to whom I have raised my protest. Okay, in terms of the impact this is going to have upon our ability to. You can't preach temperance from a bar stool. You can't go to a global climate summit and tell other countries not to do something while you yourself are doing the same thing that you're telling them not to do. So that's my message to them, and I delivered it very strongly and with those exact words.
I believe you have. One last thing for you, and it brings it down to a local level. You and the governor are facing an issue too, not quite of this magnitude, but it elicits a lot of strong emotions, in Bedford at Hanscom. I believe it's the largest facility for private jets in the region. There's a proposal for expansion. There's a senator, I don't remember his name, who said that private jet travel is a luxury our climate cannot afford. Do you know who said? Yeah, exactly. It was him. It was him. By the way, I'm not intending to put you on the spot unless you want to be put on the spot about what you're going to do. But I want to talk about the symbolism for a second. We've talked about it a lot on the radio. Every time it comes up, let me tell you the two kinds of calls we get. One, so let me understand something. I'm supposed to make sacrifices in my own life, but billionaires don't have to make any sacrifices in their lives. And then people who know the issue better say things like, which I did not know to be true, but I looked up afterwards, that an average one passenger on a private jet is responsible for 10 to 20 times as great a set of emissions as a passenger on a commercial jet. So I guess my question, you can speak to the merits if you choose, but beyond that, do you consider the symbolic impact of decisions on environmental things and what impact it may have on the public who you need to come along on virtually everything you do? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I think I understand, Jim. I mean, the reality in a process like this that's, going through a Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act review right now, I really can't talk about the merits of it. But when there is a legal process, we abide by that legal process and we don't prejudge the outcome of it. And that's,
but you
that's
do understand
really important.
the potential
Yeah.
of impact on the public if this is approved while others are forced to cut back.
I do, and I very much hear, the question around Willow, the question around LNG. I see the analogy to Bedford. I'm not denying that. I lived near that airport for a long time. I know how disruptive those flights are and how polluting they can be, notwithstanding the greenhouse gas emissions from them. But if you're asking, is the decision based on symbolic considerations, it's not, because we have a legal framework and we abide by that.
Okay, so we have to end in a second, but my mother used to say that my personal motto should be borrowed from Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who once said, if you don't have anything good to say about anybody, come sit right next to me. And that is generally my approach to life. But in light of the fact that I know that all of you in this room feel so warmly about both these people, I'm gonna do something I would never do on the radio and say, why don't you each take a minute or so and say whatever you didn't get to say that you think it's important that this audience hears, starting with you, Chief Hoffer.
Thanks, Jim. I kind of want to pick up on something that Dan said during his remarks, and it sort of runs through all the questions that you asked and what we've been talking about. And that is that it is time for all of us to have a very candid conversation with each other, with everybody we know, in all walks of life, about what this moment is. because while there are a lot of incredible things happening and incredible leadership on this, we have a really limited time. This is an extremely precarious moment. We saw September temperatures, for example, a global average of 1.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which has caused climate scientists to call it shocking, stunning, unprecedented, absolutely gobsmackingly bananas. So it is, and that's a direct quote. So this is not a safe time. These aren't necessarily safe limits, they're policy limits from Paris. And we see that unfolding. Maybe people have seen the video footage from Acapulco. This is a lot of human suffering. We are seeing the signs of a beginning of collapse in the insurance markets. We have insurance, I was just speaking with insurance executives, former insurance executives this week. Insurance companies take our premiums and they invest them in the market. Insurance companies are large institutional investors. When insurance companies begin to fail, that poses a systemic financial risk. So this isn't just about a storm happening somewhere or fires. This is about our economy. It's about everything that we love and it's about everything that we care about. And it is dead serious. So we need to say to each other right now, these projects that are being built, if you're troubled by an undersea transmission line that's going to be coming up on a beloved beach, and I get that, there are many places I really love, I think we need to have discussions about that, because that question isn't about, is that beach going to be there the way you have known it and loved it forever, or is it going to be there with a transmission line? The question is, we're about to see six feet of sea level rise in this area by the end of the century. We won't have that beach. So things are changing so fast and so dramatically that these are the kinds of conversations we need to have. We have a social, it's not just a clean energy transition, right? It's a huge cultural transition. Everything's going to be different. A lot of things are going to be really different. So to the extent we can talk to each other about the positive story of this, the work that all of you guys are doing to drive it and grow it, and how it's going to be better because it will be more equitable and there'll be less criteria pollutants, just the other bad kind of pollution, it's actually going to be better. But we got to talk about that, and that means really talking to each other about the risk that we're facing right now.
Thank you, Chief Hoffer.
Beautiful.
Senator Markey.
Thank you. Great job. Great job. Yeah, so the fossil fuel industry has been running a science experiment with the planet. And Boston Harbor, it's called the Gulf of Maine on the map, but Boston Harbor, second fastest warming body of water on the planet. So we're part of this whole experiment, big time. And we're very vulnerable to those superstorms. They're coming our way, unless we do something about it. So I saw Joe Manchin on Meet the Press like 3 months ago, and Chuck Todd was saying to him, are you going to run for president? Well, I'm going to decide later on this year. Are you going to run for the Senate? Well, I'm going to decide later on this year. I'm going to decide later on this year. I'm going to say, well, you know, people say you're going to have trouble down in West Virginia because of the IRA, that you supported it. And he said, oh, I was just at a ribbon cutting last week with the Secretary of Energy, and we're going to bring 800 battery jobs down to West Virginia. And there's more coming, just like that. So I saw Joe the next day on the Senate floor, and I said, Joe, was there a comma in that sentence that you misplaced? Shouldn't the next sentence have been, and those 800 jobs come from Somerville, Massachusetts, Form Energy, which are not using lithium ion, but using iron, I-R-O-N, the third most common element on the planet, in order to have a new battery technology. And I said, that would just show what a partnership we have in the innovation economy of Massachusetts, of Greentown, of the engine, of all of these incredible entities that we have up in Massachusetts, and the manufacturing that might go on in West Virginia or Georgia or some other states. So the reality is that the people in this room are going to reinvent energy.
Yep.
Thomas Alva Edison could still recognize our electricity grid. We're going to reinvent it. We're going to reinvent it with your help. We're going to find new materials. We're going to find new ways of solving historically intractable problems. It's going to be driven mostly by young people who want to dedicate their lives to solving this problem. And it's going to be led by the people who are in this room. Biotech, 100,000 jobs in Massachusetts. You're already up to 104,000 jobs. And you're only just beginning. Joe's going to have this in Boston Garden in 10 years, okay? That's what the potential is if you make sure in 2024 that people vote Democratic. Because whether it be the Speaker of the House or Donald Trump, they all got their climate degree from Trump University, okay? and they're not going to change, okay? So there's going to be a lot of millionaires we make. That's my goal. And a lot of people might wind up being Republican in the long term, but for 2024, you better vote Democrat. You better organize Democrat. You better contribute Democrat, because they're coming for you. They're going to be the largest single contributors to the Republican Party effort in 2024. And everything that you believe in and everything that you know that is possible is that the technology will be unleashed if we get the politics in our country correct. Yeah. So we thank you for everything you've done so far, and we're looking forward to all of the great innovation you're going to unleash.
Please join me in thanking Chief Hoffer and Senator Ed Markey.
Great job. That was beautiful.
You too.